Hello, and welcome to Confidently Wrong, a show by regular dudes talking with confidence about content we have no right to speak about with any kind of authority, but do it anyway. I'm Wesley Nakamura, and as always, I'm joined by Mike Smith, award-winning director Brian Redondo, and Savon Jones, aka Captain Vonnie. This is episode 52, and we finally get to talk about an incredible movie, Spider-Man: No Way Home. I'm confident that it's going to be the best show you've ever listened to, and well, hey, if it's not, you can always ask us for a refund.
Incredible!
Guys, welcome back. Happy New Year 2022. I hope you're excited. I hope you noticed the new theme music that we got to throw in. Savon and his buddy Duriel worked really hard over the past couple months to get it popping. Savon, how was that process for you?
Oh, it was fun. Duriel's an old G homie. We go back way to the high school days, and he always used to mess around with production. So being able to just collaborate with the homeboy in a more professional sense, we set our Discord meetings and all that.
Ooh, a Discord.
Ideas. We in the lab, it was a fun process. It's nice to be able to mess around with things that have intersection of your friends' hobbies in like a formal manner. But shout out to Duriel, also known as Bay Self. He's a great dude, great to work with. I highly recommend.
Mike can attest to this. I was just like way out of my element. I would just suggest things or say things, and then Mike would be like, let's just leave this to the professionals. Maybe some general feedback would be good.
What you're not
like,
including
you're right.
You had very specific musical input, and if my understanding is correct, you don't have a lot of musical experience, Wesley, and I feel like that's... I've played music enough or no actual musicians and music production people to know that that's probably super freaking annoying of like just some damn guy being like, hey, I think we should change those like hi-hats from like 16th to like 8th notes, and then maybe let's throw in a couple like arpeggiated synths. It's like, then what are you talking about? Like,
I was out of my element.
Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta know. And sometimes you need your homies to call you out on it. So thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
That is literally part of my role in the show, is just calling Wesley out and reeling him back in.
Hey, you gave fire feedback, Wes.
I was excited.
Don't let him make you feel bad.
Yeah, and the it was cool to see kind of the song evolve over time and kind of what changes you and Duriel made to it. So it was pretty cool.
That was fun.
At the very end of last year, right before we kind of went on this little mini break, a little holiday break, so we could see our families and, from Mike, go sit on a beach somewhere, and Savon went home to eat some gumbo, I'm sure, and, do all the holiday things. A pretty terrific cinematic experience. I think I can confidently say that. A cinematic experience, Spider-Man: No Way Home, came out into theaters, not on Disney Plus. They didn't do that with us. They said straight to the theater. You got to go risk the COVID.
I'm glad they didn't.
Oh man, so good. All right. So for those of you who haven't seen it yet, there's lots of spoilers. We're not going to save you from the spoilers. If you haven't seen it yet, it's been like 3 or 4 weeks. Like, it's too bad, so sad. Turn off now. Mike, 60-second summary of the movie for those of the people out there like me who just like cannot remember what happens,
okay,
chronologically.
In the end of the second movie, Peter's identity is revealed by J. Jonah Jameson, who's played again by J.K. Simmons. We all love that. So this movie starts out, he's in turmoil. I think this is a Spider-Man story we've seen across comics. We've seen, pretty common thing is Peter's identity gets revealed. And for him being like a regular guy, it's not like Tony Stark where he can have his identity revealed. Like his life essentially gets thrown out. A funny thing I saw, just a sidebar here, is like I saw a tweet. It was like, "Damn, Tony really didn't leave Peter anything in his will, huh? He just left him like a pair of glasses. Like he could have paid for his college. He gave him like a good apartment, anything like that. Zilch. Anyway, so it starts out Peter and MJ. They're happy together now, but the world is falling apart around them. So Peter kind of plays with God a little bit. He goes to Doctor Strange and asks him to make a spell to have everybody forget that he's Spider-Man. Long story short, he realizes, I don't want MJ to forget. I don't want Ned to forget all this. He starts messing with the spell, and Doctor Strange, as he's getting distracted, he messes up the spell, And that kind of breaks the multiverse, because then what it's going to do is it's bringing in people who knew Spider-Man from other universes, and that's where we're at. So movie progresses a little bit. Like the main crux is they can't get into MIT, boo-hoo. So then what happens is all the other villains from the other movies come. We had Green Goblin, we had played by Willem Dafoe again, Alfred Molina playing Doc Ock. We had some guys from Ultimate Spider-Man or Amazing Spider-Man, and then even the Tobey Maguire ones, and then obviously from his own movie. Essentially, the core conflict is him trying to really realize if he wants to be Spider-Man, if he could handle it. He still has that good heart. He's trying to redeem these guys instead of sending them back to die, because obviously most of these villains have died in their own universes. Throughout that drama, obviously the other Spider-Men have come into the universe as well, so we got to see Tobey Maguire in the original Spider-Man as well as Andrew Garfield. So it was really, I think everybody at this point like knows what this is. This is kind of one of those Marvel movies where I think like regardless of how much you like Marvel, it's pretty much firmly in the zeitgeist right now. Maybe not to the extent of things like the last Avengers movies or Black Panther, but I do think you can't really go anywhere on social media, anywhere on the internet, and not see the other Spider-Man.
60 seconds. Boom. I didn't time it, so I don't know.
That was not 60 seconds, but I love the movie, so the
Yeah.
listeners can deal.
It's amazing. And our buddy Brian, you might notice, has not made his appearance yet. Brian is actually on his way back from, well, I'll let him introduce himself. He does talk about it, so hang on here. Let me play it for us. All right. Can you guys hear it? No, wait. It's not playing. Zoom's controls are in the way. Can I move them?
Oh,
You still
we
got that
free
YouTube.
Testing. All right, Wes.
Oh.
Are you ready? This is for you.
Can you guys hear it?
Yeah.
All right.
Hello, Confidently Wrong listeners. This is Brian. Hey, everybody. Happy New Year. Sorry I couldn't be part of this episode, so I am pre-recording this for everybody from a small island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Guam. I'm here visiting my in-laws. I'm 15 hours ahead of East Coast time, so technically I'm in the future. If you want to know what happens tomorrow, just ask. I can confidently tell you that it's still 2022 and it's January. Yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna talk briefly about the new Spider-Man movie, No Way Home, which came out just before Christmas, and give you my thoughts, because I think my thoughts are very valuable, and I want to give that to everybody. So, so I finally saw Spider-Man No Way Home here on Guam, and you know, it's very easy to say that this is the best live-action Spider movie of all time.
Spider movie.
I mean, it's kind of a low bar, so of course it is. And but in case you're wondering, it's not the best Spider-Man movie. Into the Spider-Verse is still king in that regard. Savon, you should go see it. But in terms of live action, hey, this thing is phenomenal. And you know, everybody already knows that. But really, what I want to say is that what's most surprising about it is not that it's the best of the Spider-Man movies, but that it's a superhero movie that really should not work, right? It's the kind of overstuffed superhero movie that should be crumbling by its own weight because of all the villains and all the superheroes and side characters in it, and you know, all of those things in the past have worked against movies from working. I mean, remember the train wreck of Batman and Robin, or even Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3? Like, more villains and heroes should not equal more thumbs up. It's usually the opposite, but yet No Way Home finds a way to make it all work. And even though the movie feels like the writers just decided on all the big blockbuster set pieces first and figured out the loose plot to connect everything second, I I think the movie succeeds really in most part because of the strength of all of its performances. And, I'm thinking about, how awesome Jamie Foxx is, how devious and maniacal Willem Dafoe is. Even though his Sam Raimi version is totally campy, he really redeems himself here. Alfred Molina, of course, is great. And, of course, our previous Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. So I want to actually call out the two best scenes in the film that demonstrate how far we've come with Spider-Man.
Called it a film.
So first is the scene with all three Spideys on the school rooftop. Mm-hmm. When both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield go with MCU's version of MJ to see the Tom Holland version of Spider-Man, who's just gone through the painful loss of Aunt May. And our previous two Spideys, confront him, and they all commiserate over their personal trauma and failures, each sharing their peak pain points that have defined them. And that scene is so visceral and powerful. And it's like, who knew that Andrew Garfield could actually act? Like Tobey Maguire even. I started actually feeling really sympathetic for those two characters who I've never felt anything for before other than pure hatred, to be very real and honest. But in this particular movie, they give great performances, and couple that with Tom Holland's own performance of his painful loss and his feeling of hopelessness. And then you get this incredibly visceral scene where, I admit, maybe I welled up a little bit in the theater watching. And then the second scene that I want to call out is when Ned Leeds is at home, presumably in Woodside, Queens, where he uses Doctor Strange's sling ring to open up the portals that allow our two previous Spideys to enter the MCU. And this scene is great because of the performance of Ned's Lola, who speaks entirely in unsubtitled Tagalog the entire scene and makes it such a delightful, funny scene. I watched the movie here on Guam where there's a huge Filipino population. So the Filipino audience cackled immediately when she first gasped, Salamancero, watching Ned do his thing. Salamancero means like wizard or magician or sorcerer or something like that. And so it's like a real milestone for Filipinos to see themselves in a blockbuster Marvel movie, especially in a way that is more heartwarming and empathetic than something like a flat stereotype, which is usually the only thing Filipinos are presented as in these Hollywood movies. And this scene really works, not just because Lola is speaking Tagalog the whole time, but because Ned himself is so likable and has built up so much cachet throughout his MCU journey that the audience is along for the ride in his home, and they want to know they're delighted to see his backstory, and they want to know more about his magical Filipino roots that Lola alludes to, despite the lack of language comprehension for most audiences. And so it's that interplay of likability and kind of a track record and backstory that we as audiences want to be part of that makes these scenes work, right? Like we are familiar with all the Spider-Men. We are familiar with the Spider-Man backstories. We are familiar with his supporting characters. And because the performances are so strong, we're along for the ride. We just like eat it up. And that's what this movie was really all about. No Way Home, like everybody gets a piece of the pie. Everybody is redeemed no matter how bad the previous 20 years of Spider-Man has been. It all comes to a point here and culminates in such a wildly wonderful way. And that, has left audiences, myself included, very, very happy. So I am beyond delighted. I can't wait to see where they take Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and I'm also very curious about what happens with Ned Leeds. He clearly has some magic in him, and I hope we get to see Lola at least one more time. That is all. Thank you very much. Hawkeye was not so great.
Oh my God, that was so unnecessary.
Good job, Brian. We end the show there. That kind of summed up all my thoughts.
Well, let's respond to kind of one of the first things he said, or one of his main points, and then we'll talk about notable scenes a little bit later. But Brian kind of posited that it's a superhero movie that shouldn't work given the vast numbers of characters that were in there, all of the loose ends that were sort of bound to come up. We didn't really get a deep dive into any of the characters. Too many villains, too many superheroes, too many side characters. But he says No Way Home finds a way to work. Savon, do you find that that's one of the things that was kind of surprising to you about this movie? Or is this just sort of nah, I kind of expected it to work. It wasn't a big deal for you?
Well, I legitimately had no idea there were going to be so many characters. Because again, I go hard with the no trailers. I didn't watch any trailers for that movie. So all I knew going in was that maybe Dr. Octopus appears. Other than that, everybody else was a total surprise.
You had no idea there were going to be other Spider-Man?
No. I didn't know.
Did you lose your mind?
I lost my
really?
mind. Well,
really?
at first when he opened the portal, I thought it was he opened the portal to another dimension. I was like, oh no, the other Spider-Man are in this. In the back of my head, I was like, are they gonna bring the other Spider-Man? I'm like, nah, that's gonna be way too many people. They ain't gonna do that. And then they did that. So all throughout that movie, I was consistently just my jaw kept dropping lower to the floor.
I'm jealous because this was. You realize this was rumored, leaked for years.
I went out of and I just assumed
I didn't know either.
I don't believe the hype, and I just go out of my way.
I mean, Wesley, that's just because you're kind of in your own world. Savon, it's a concerted effort to avoid these things.
Yeah,
I didn't make a concerted effort, but I certainly wasn't. I kind of watched the first trailer, and then after that, I wasn't going out of my way to see a trailer or look up anything on Reddit or anything like that. So. Mm-hmm. I did know some of the villains were coming because I saw the movie about 2 weeks after it was released. So people just kind of mentioned Green Goblin on the on Twitter and Dr. Octopus and stuff, but nobody on my timeline mentioned the other Spider-Man, which is thank you to my timeline for not spoiling that part of it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess to answer your original question of what makes it work, well, I didn't think they were going to do that many characters to begin with, but I think what makes it work is that we're finally in that real hit the ground running post Endgame period where it is a connected MCU now. This is the norm. And I think I've talked about this with y'all before of even in the Marvel world, right? The West Coast and New York are the two places where everything happens. Just in real life, if any of us go to New York, we got friends in New York or we got friends in LA. That's how it is in the superhero world. Everybody's based out of New York.
There's no superheroes in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Surprisingly, no. I guess Spider-Man will struggle with the lack of buildings to swing. But no, but actually, I mean, New York, you got Daredevil, you got Spider-Man, you got all the Netflix characters. They're all New York heroes. So this is just kind of what happens when you build your universe organically over time. Once you've been doing it for 10 plus years. You can get away with this kind of stuff because you just have different legit fan bases. I think what they did well that made it not crumble under the weight of itself is that there are a lot of characters, but not all the characters have a lot to do, but in a good way. Dr. Connor's character, Lizard, doesn't have a lot to do, but it's okay. He's just there to kind of just be a wild card. Electro's thing is, okay, I'm trying to steal energy. It's not really a complicated motive. And they do a good job. The best thing they do is that what Spider-Man 3 struggled with is that they meaningfully tie all the characters still back to Peter Tom Holland. When it's all said and done, he's trying to cure him, he's trying to help him, some of them he actually helps. So they kind of have all these characters, but they give them all something meaningful to do. Although you could argue Lizard was maybe just kind of there for no reason. But I don't know. I think they were intentional this time about not giving all the characters too much.
Mike, what did you find that you liked most about this movie? Because I think all of us were pretty into it. So what kind of stood out to you?
So I think Savon, definitely did a good job, and Brian as well, explaining like what specifically made this, as a movie, as 200 minutes or whatever. No, it wasn't 200 minutes. It was what? 150 minutes. What made this like a fun thing to watch? And I think there was a lot of good in there, obviously, right? Like, I'm not going to rehash it all. Great acting, like connection to the MCU, all of that. But I think they even kind of took it a step further in terms of leveraging those kind of connections. So like what I wrote was like, to me, we can argue, is this the best Marvel movie? I think we can all agree it's up there, but it's kind of like they took the best of Marvel. And I think, as we went through the Infinity War Endgame saga, Civil War as well, it's clear that superhero bloat or not, the MCU has become kind of its own living entity. And what can really make or break a movie is how it can play off of that and kind of use that to its advantage. Because what we've seen is that now that all that groundwork has been put in, all these origin stories build up all of that, when you have people like the Russo brothers that are able, or even now with John Watts, people that can tell really good stories, but understand the universe, understand how it's all connected, and then use that as almost its own character, right? So it's not just about those individual moments, it's almost about playing off of what's already been built in the larger MCU. But I completely agree with Brian. On paper, this shouldn't have worked. Like, how could this possibly work? 3 different Spider-Man villains from 6 different stories, and we're not only telling like a good, decent story, like it's wrapping up something that's been built across several movies. Like, what's clear is that we didn't get a traditional origin story for this Peter. We got a trilogy of how he really becomes grown-up Spider-Man. And I think was so powerful about this is that it connected not just to the MCU as a whole with Doctor Strange, and obviously that's almost become secondary, and he was still a major character in this, but with just superheroes as a whole with all these other Spider-Men. So, Infinity War was obviously groundbreaking, right? Because it brought in all these superheroes. Now we're doing that across 20 years of different actual cinematic universes in a way that was meaningful and not forced, and ultimately just gave us those great character moments that we love with stakes that, again, weren't forced. Like, we've talked about that with a lot of, now that we're in the post-Endgame saga, the post-Infinity saga, we're seeing them having to build up a lot of things, and that's difficult in the Marvel universe. So, and I've always said that, like, sequels and mashups and things are always going to have an advantage in Marvel versus kind of origin stories. And I think that this just hit the mark perfectly of bringing in all these other characters, all these other universes, leveraging about what people made about them, cutting out what people didn't because you only had little bits, in a way that just really felt true to all the characters. Mm-hmm. And that's not even touching on that this is actually closure for the other 2 Spider-Man, because obviously, like Brian said, not exactly critically acclaimed, not exactly widely loved, but I mean, even Andrew Garfield said that this was massive closure for him. I mean, I think seeing, and I like the Tobey Maguire movies, obviously. You can say what you want about Spider-Man 3, but that specific character got closure. And I think for all of us, when that was like really the first superhero movie, why mainstream in our life, like seeing that Peter be happy and kind of in his own place, I think in so many ways, this movie just built on itself. And kind of like, I don't know what the opposite of a vicious cycle is, but like it just really took its momentum and built a strong movie that people cared about.
It had good stuff in the crock pot.
Yeah, for sure, right? But like that can go bad easy too. And it's like it's far harder to make these movies cohesive and work and be entertaining and then fundamentally strong than it is to just throw stuff in a pot and work. So maybe like I don't know how easy it is to mess up a crock pot, but
pretty hard.
Well, then bad examples of all.
I think it's this might be a kind of a boring pod in the sense that like we all seem to agree that like they did a really good job making this movie and it turned out great. It was super enjoyable. I think for me, but it's kind of interesting to hear what stood out to you guys. Like I didn't care as much about the 2 other Spider-Men. I didn't enjoy those movies as much, and so seeing them come back, it was like whatever. I mean, they had a great role in this one, but the nostalgia and the closure like that, I didn't really care about that. But what I was invested in was the this movie spent a little bit more time and a lot more time focusing on the relationship between Peter, Ned, and MJ, and letting them sort of work out together as a team. Like, how do we, again, choose our family, right? Like, I mean, it's an MCU classic theme of like chosen family, and they're starting to do that and to rely on each other, and you're getting to see how that plays out amongst these like younger characters that we've gotten to know a little bit in the previous movies, but they often got set within their high school friend group. And in this one, they're pretty far removed from their high school friend group, and we just get to see like the dynamics between them. I enjoy that. I think that stuff is very cool. They clearly have a lot of chemistry together. And Zendaya's character, MJ specifically, got way more well-rounded in this one. She got way more to do, way more to say, way more to express and act on. And that was cool just to see her like get to flex herself a little bit, rather than just sort of be like the one-liner, miserable
Snarky
person.
stuff.
Yeah,
edgelord is what you're describing.
Yeah, she was just sort of there right before as like the object of Peter's, I don't know, desire,
Affection.
but not necessarily there as a full-fleshed character. So I thought that was cool. And then Brian already pointed out the Filipino representation. I thought that was pretty neat, and they did it like he said, they did it without subtitles, kind of how Into the Spider-Verse did it without subtitles as well for when the mom and he speak Spanish. And then having the multiple Spider-Men working together, I thought was a double-edged sword. It was really cool just to see them all be able to do different things, but I couldn't tell which one was which. And that was a little bit visually hard.
That's a you problem. That's 100%.
Like you could tell which one was Tom Holland because he had like gold, but the two other ones, their suits were so similar when they're swinging around the Statue of Liberty. I had no idea. Which one was which.
Yeah, me and Savon are
black lines.
yeah, with the big eyes, and then Toby just has the This is a you.
Attention
this
to
is a
detail
you problem.
Everybody in my family couldn't tell. No one was like, we could tell who they were. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, well,
the voices were similar.
they also don't host nerd podcasts. So
Yeah.
I think we're gonna hold you to a different standard.
Nah,
here.
I
Big
think
facts.
that's a problem for everybody. This movie is for everybody, not just
But I bet
for
you teleport
the
not
Not
diehards.
my problem.
All right. And then what else? Yeah. And then just having callbacks to previous movies, and we'll talk about that more with the Easter egg section coming up. So is there anything that missed the mark for you, Mike? I'd be interested to hear if anything, you were so into it. Like, did anything actually not quite hit it for you?
I mean, I think I was so into it that I kind of forgot. And it's a debate if this is a fundamental flaw, if this is just kind of how movies, work that aren't, serious cinema. But it's just a thing where it's like, proper... I mean, look, I'm not Martin
Sure, Brian called it a
Scorsese,
film.
but there's a difference. There's a difference between this and like, I don't know, what's a good movie, Wesley? I don't know.
Dang, he's
Memento.
a good movie. You hit
No,
it.
but you know what I mean. Like,
I don't
there's
know
a
if I
difference
can-
between like Enema of the State by Blink-182 and like, Kind of Blue by
Tchaikovsky.
Miles Davis. Like, you're not exactly.
that means.
Anyway, it's just one of those things where communication would have saved the day, right? Like if Peter and Doctor Strange effectively communicated before doing the spell, like none of this would have happened. So it's just kind of shenanigans led into all of this. But I mean, at a certain point, that's just going to be everywhere across these movies, right? Maybe not so much like... It can be a discrepancy of like if you have really high stakes, like we're talking the multiverse falling apart and it was all just caused by Strange's arrogance and Peter's kind of selfishness to a certain extent. But I mean, like you go to even the Infinity War, like if they just like chilled Peter Quill out, like he wouldn't have punched Thanos and none of that would have happened, right? Like, so it's kind of annoying. Like it's almost like Seinfeld where it's like, oh, if they had a cell phone, like the show wouldn't exist because none of the problems would have happened. It's kind of like one of those things where the core of the movie's conflict is just driven by some kind of foolishness. But I mean, that's also just for movies like this, it's kind of just core to it. I think it might not have been possible to lay up those stakes because then you would have to have all that work previously, right? Like with the Infinity Stones, they had 10 years of that. You can't just really create stakes that high in a way that is like kind of in its own right authentic. But I also think given the characters we had and the way they built up those characters, it makes sense that Strange and Peter would behave that way in that situation. Maybe not so much Strange's arrogance, but I think that also partially has to do, when I read this, is that originally Doctor Strange was supposed to come out before this movie, so they kind of had to rewrite who his character was. And obviously he's not the Sorcerer Supreme anymore. It's just kind of, you gotta look past that a bit, but we've been doing that for 11, 12 years with these movies.
So, two things. One, I'll get to what I wasn't a fan of in a sec, but one thing I actually liked, and it's kind of the same thing with y'all in the Doctor Strange bit, is that I feel like the MCU has kind of not really shown us that Doctor Strange is not this infallible figure. And this is like more of like a comic source material thing. Doctor Strange pretty regularly causes problems that he has to fix himself. Like that's like a recurring theme in the comics because yes, he's Sorcerer Supreme, yes, he's hot stuff, all that's true. The homie's still messing with powers that a mortal just shouldn't be messing with. And Wong even gives him that warning, right? Of like, you sure you won't mess around with this spell? Like that's not a, I think that's kind of a hint that Doctor Strange has a trend of being really arrogant and biting off more than he can chew to try and fix a problem and ends up causing bigger problems that he didn't have to fix. That's not a new thing. And so I actually kind of like that they're kind of reeling Doctor Strange back a bit because all we've seen is him beat Dormammu, go hand to hand with Thanos, set up the plan that ultimately saves the universe. Like
cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah, and so I like that we actually got to see him straight up F up because in the comics, Doctor Strange pretty regularly Fs up. Like there's a point where he summons a demon and the demon causes more problems than what he was trying to fix. Like he does that on the regular. Like he becomes more of an almost chaotic neutral character, or he's way more morally ambiguous. I like that they went that direction. Now, as far as what I just didn't hit the mark for me, I thought the ending was whack. I just did not like the ending. I thought that ending spell bit was silly. My suspension of disbelief, y'all know this, it is not broken easily. My suspension of disbelief was broken when they were just like, oh, so the whole world's going to just forget this man? And I visibly rolled my eyes in the theater. I was just like, serious, B? Like
it's like they're all going to go back to the school and see the shrine to Peter Parker and be like, who's that guy? Why is he next to Spider-Man?
Yeah, that's just way, even if you try to suspend your disbelief a little bit, it just raised too many questions. And the funny thing is that MCU is so good about adapting the source material and improving on it. And somehow they adapted this from the comics of him wanting to erase the memory of Spider-Man. And that comic was awful. I remember reading it. It was terrible because it just didn't make any damn sense. Like, I think in the comic, Human Torch figures out, yo, did Spider-Man mess with our memory? Because it's basically even the writer saying, hey, bro, there's just way too many discrepancies and questions that pops up for someone to not be like, yo, why do we have memory gaps and stuff with this man? So that really was a dud at the end, like on an otherwise amazing movie, because almost everything else I love, but that memory spell, just the threat of the spell was dope. Them actually having to use it at the end was whack. Like it was cool as an idea, but just trying to make the world forget a dude who's been critically involved with so much crap, it's just, how's happy, like even the ending with the Aunt May funeral, how is happy even a friend of Spider-Man's if their whole relationship is tied between the Peter Parker identity? Like, it doesn't make any damn sense.
It's like he remembers Spider-Man but doesn't remember Peter Parker. Yeah, it is kind of hard.
No, you just
to
didn't
reconcile.
remember that Peter Parker was Spider-Man.
But he doesn't know who Peter Parker is.
Oh, I don't know.
So he just remembers all Spider-Man.
Yeah. It's like being Billy Ray Cyrus and knowing Miley Cyrus but not Hannah Montana. It's like, okay, cool. This person has been around this person forever. That just don't work. They go hand in hand. Like, so
why are all these blonde wigs in my daughter's closet?
Shucks. Who are these pictures? Like, yeah, so I don't know, man. That really soured and otherwise like
that's interesting.
I
was sort of
movie for me.
The opposite in terms of which spell I was into. I thought the first spell was annoying because I was like, how could Doctor Strange, who is clearly a very gifted sorcerer, he's had lots of experience at this point. Like, it's not his first day on the job. He clearly knows what he's doing. He barely had to like look up this spell, and he does a bad job with it. Like, just because
Peter messes him up.
Nah,
yeah.
I mean, whatever.
You gotta
but like,
focus.
it doesn't change the spell. And then, so like,
oh, I didn't.
That's what it is, right? The super strong guy who's very
Right.
good at spells is all of a sudden just like, whoops, a typo on the thing. Like, come on. And then
that's my point.
Yeah, but the ending spell, I was like, well, if we're gonna say that the spell is valid, which like fine, like I know I'll go through the movie and just like see what happens, then like the ending makes sense in that like it was dropped in, it was led to, and like it paid off. Like I felt like that worked for me. So it's funny, like we're kind of opposite, that you thought the beginning spell and it having it go broke was more believable and more interesting than the ending spell, and I was kind of the reverse, that like, well, why would it break in the first place? Like that doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, like I said, to me, it's just this is them trying to show Doctor Strange is not God. Just because we've seen him be a badass in all these other movies, probably to maybe excessively. Like I think this is them reeling back, because again, like in most other media depictions of Doctor Strange, he causes as many problems as he solves.
And maybe that's where I sort of had the like disconnect, was because the last time we saw him, he was doing, hugely powerful things in Endgame. And
again,
like that.
I think a lot of this is driven by his movie was supposed to come out before this, and we probably would have obviously gotten a lot of character development, and he's going to come out on the other end of that as a different person. And my understanding is I actually did have to rewrite quite a bit of his character to kind of align with where Doctor Strange is at the point of this movie versus if the other one came out first.
Huh. Interesting. All right.
I do like the nerfing of him, though, overall. It makes him a more interesting character. Like, Spider-Man beating him in a nerd fight was really satisfying because, again, Doctor Strange is not God. He loses to people all the time in comics and, like, messes up. So I'm hoping Multiverse kind of continues on that, honestly, of, like, hey, he's going to take some L's, and that's okay, but, like, you're going to take some L's.
Fair enough.
Because they kind of have to nerf him if Wanda's going to be the strongest wizard, right?
Yeah.
She should be, logically, right?
Yeah.
So there are several in this movie. They did several moments that were pretty like heartbreaking or sad, in a way that they haven't really done in the Spider-Man movies previously, and has only happened a few times here and there in the MCU. In this one, I mean, just off the top of my head, like May dying was the one that jumped out to me. The kids feeling pretty dejected about not being able to get into MIT through no real fault of their own. At the end, in the ending, Peter having to go in and see his friends not remember him and just be living their lives. And he's having to decide whether he's going to disrupt their lives again and try and reintroduce himself as Spider-Man, or let them be and sort of protect them from the knowledge that, that he's Spider-Man. Did any of that work for you? Did it not work for you? And then I think my second question is, why incorporate that now when we've had two movies that have been mostly just like fun teenage romps and haven't been like had that level of weight and emotionality to it?
You want to take this one, Mike?
Sure. So did it work? Yes. Why? Because, like I said earlier, this is what we're seeing is obviously this movie ends in a very deliberate way of him kind of jumping off into his new life as college Spider-Man. So these three. No, I'm serious. That's like you're
Spider-Man.
Yeah, well, GED, but with college Spider-Man. Again, like Tony Stark really like college funds, like could have really helped his boy out here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he was dead.
No, but prior, you think people have wills, Savon.
Yeah, but
Like,
Spider-Man was
money.
dead for 5 years before Endgame, remember? He was dead. So by the time everything pops off and Tony brings everyone back, he just dies. He didn't really have time to do a will.
He didn't have to try to
Touché.
change his will.
There was a very small window between him getting
Like, he came
unblocked
back, hugged him, and then died 5 minutes later.
refuses to elaborate. What was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, I think, again, like, the strength of Marvel at its best is when it takes from the larger MCU, and in this movie, it takes from the larger kind of Spider-Man zeitgeist as a whole, and it doesn't just throw the characters in for cool fights and things like that. It builds authentic character moments with those characters. And I think with just Tom Holland's Spider-Man, as well as the other ones, they did that in a way that it really kind of wrapped up the character. So that's why they needed to do that in this movie, because the other one was building them up. I'm going to butcher this, but I saw something. The first one is like, how do I be Spider-Man? The second one is like, do I want to be Spider-Man? And then the third one is like, should I be Spider-Man? Like, do I actually want to do this? Or I guess the first one's like, how do I be Spider-Man? So it's like this really just wraps up all of that to launch him into his new era of grown-up Spider-Man, and I think you needed to kind of have that emotional weight there. I also think they're probably being very intentional with like having him grow up so much in this movie so he can be a leader for all the other younger Avengers, because at a certain point he can't just be the kid anymore, like the wide-eyed kid. Like, he's grown up a ton since Civil War, like physically as a person, and then the character needs to follow that. So I think with everything you listed, all those moments, they worked for me incredibly well. Like, me and Alan were definitely like shedding some tears in the movie, not looking at each other like gentlemen, just eyes forward, wiping our tears. And for me, like, I think his moments were really great, but I think the other Spider-Man really took the emotionality of the movie to another level. I think, Brian said it, but the three of them on the roof of the school, like, kind of realizing they have that shared trauma was incredibly powerful. The moment of Toby stopping Tom from killing the Green Goblin, like, there was zero dialogue in that moment, but I think, like, it said so much about those characters and the movies and where they were all at, and I think that spoke to a lot of people. Even like Andrew getting to save MJ, like that specific moment, like his redemption there, like that, is that a good or a bad?
No, that's like a that was
I mean, like I know that. I mean, that
was
was just like, I mean, again, it's just like they really meaningfully picked the moments from these movies and the parts of these characters that I think connected with people, and they almost redeemed them in a way. So I think the heartbreaking moment, like this movie had a bunch of just guys across the world like shedding tears and in private.
In public.
That helps
In
clarify
public,
things for
but
me.
like
I'm
smart, not gonna be.
Mike, that was smart. Yeah, not in
Thank
public.
you.
But yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I think you're right though. Like, there's a chance here now, right, where Spider-Man does go from kid Spider-Man to grown-up Spider-Man, and by doing it the way they did it at the end of the movie, he's actually really disconnected from everybody.
And that's supposed to be Spider-Man.
Right?
Like,
he's isolated right at this point.
I saw a tweet. It was like, why do people like Spider-Man? It's because like he goes from saving the world to going home to like eviction notices. And I think like people really identify with the character's human struggles, and he didn't really have those up to that point. Like, he had he obviously did, but not like to the degree of, oh, I don't know how to make rent, I don't have a job, like college is screwed up, all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't know how to like talk to girls or to do anything.
Yeah, and I have this $1 million suit from Tony Stark and all that.
Yeah, they did like a reverse origin story, because as the movies go on, his situation just gets progressively harder. You first see him in Civil War, just coming in at the airport, shooba-dooba-doop, with his new suit. You see him in Homecoming, just like on the Iron Man bankroll, and just got him on speed dial. By the time you get to the second one, okay, Iron Man's gone. You got to figure stuff out on your own. The hero community's decimated. Mysterio beat him outright. And then, like, as the movies go on, he loses resources, loses support systems, and ultimately loses family. And it gets worse and worse and worse. And, not a lot of the movies, like, it gets worse in terms of the tragedy, but more in terms of him becoming Spider-Man in full. So it was a good arc across those three movies. I really appreciated that. I didn't think that was the way they were going with it, but I didn't think it would go so bleak for him. But they really went all in.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, Savon. So they're obviously hinting that the next trilogy for Tom Holland is going to be Venom with that post-credit scene.
Yeah.
And I think the whole part of, like, Venom obviously is a character and all that, but the whole struggle for Spider-Man is him reconciling his darkness and, like, anger and things like that, kind of in an Anakin way almost. And so now obviously you needed to, in this movie, give him that character development of getting all this pain, getting all this trauma. He's going to have resentment, so now that Venom can kind of give him that hatred to play off of.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of directions they could go with Venom, because they might just go straight up with like another character just becoming Venom and just going full foil. Because they might do anti-hero villain right off the gate, like they've done with this current version with what's the man name, Tom
Hardy.
Yeah. So if Venom isn't even really a villain character anymore these days. So we'll see. They're keeping it open for themselves, honestly, because maybe Tom Holland doesn't want to come back and do more Spider-Man.
I think he's going to do one more trilogy, and then I'm sure they'll pass it off to a Miles Morales character.
So, but I want to talk about the emotional parts, because these are the parts that have me either ready to cry or crying. Aunt May, obviously, that's obvious.
Whew. That one got me.
The memory stuff was sad, didn't cry. Dr. Octopus getting cured, that made me tear up because Spider-Man 2 is my favorite. Like up until this one, that was my favorite all-time Spider-Man movie. And I just
Yeah.
loved Dr. Octopus' character and how tragic and sad he was. So I guess to y'all's point of how they really leveraged the source material in a really meaningful way, me knowing how tragic his character was as a kid, get just saved and redeemed and be himself again. I was like, dang, I felt bad for that man dying 20 years ago because it was so sad, and being able to pull off those emotions. So I say this as someone who's never been a big Spider-Man fan. Y'all have already heard me be mid on like hate on his drip and all that stuff. This movie leveraged its source material to the fullest in order to really emotionally engage you, and that is not an easy task.
Mm.
And just it just had amazing actors. We haven't even talked about William Dafoe and just his character giving me chills every time. Is it Willem?
Not Willem. It's a dumb name, but it's Willem, not William.
Whoa.
Well, your
Harsh.
boy Dafoe, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. The movie just had a lot going on, and I mean that in the most positive way possible. It's not easy.
Yeah. And it was funny, like, they had all these great character moments leveraging the source material, and they essentially did it with memes the whole time. Like, there were multiple memes in this movie, and it wasn't, like, cringy or, like, corny. It was, like, a way that, like, I'm somewhat of a scientist myself. Like, Peter's like, oh, I'm trying to do better with Doctor. Like, all of that. Like, they even did the pointing thing. Like, Spider-Man. And it was, like, and it was just, that's why I mean it's, like, the best of Marvel. Like, it was so self-referential in the most beautiful ways, which is just, like, exactly like Brian said, there's no reason this movie should have worked.
What's with the Jamie Foxx big kid, kid in the mask in Queens, swinging around saving people. Thought you'd be black.
And then he goes, sorry.
So, yeah, like that. Like in the theater, I lost my mind because that's exactly. I'm like, I feel that, homie. Like I really felt that.
And like that character in the that Jamie Foxx character was not that good in his original movies, and in this, like it was I couldn't almost believe it. It was like I was watching Jamie Foxx in this dark, emotional Spider-Man movie, but it just really worked so weirdly. Maybe that's like the perfect example of how this movie should have gone, and the way it actually did was just like redeeming this kind of corny character from a forgotten movie.
Oh, I know we talked about this for a minute, but the one thing I want to say that this movie did better than the Avengers Infinity team-up movies is that, and this is by not really a fault of those movies, but they've learned that you can have this huge ensemble cast, and they did a way better job of, like I said this earlier, of giving everybody something to do, even the villains. And it worked because, even in the Avengers movies, you might just see your favorite character kill some nameless monsters for a few seconds, and that's their contribution. In this one, everybody was doing something. Dr. Connors is there just to sow chaos. Sandman just wants to get home, but that conflicts with what Jamie Foxx's character wants, Electro. So it was a solid, decent web of intertwining motivations.
Where's the bell? Ding.
I don't know. That's not easy what they did, because if even one or two characters feels like they're just here for screen time, it takes away from the movie.
We don't have time for this, but my question after hearing what you guys said would be like, what makes the difference then, right? Jamie Foxx isn't a different person. He's literally the same person doing the same character. Why does this one work and doesn't?
Because they have the foundation is such a strong story that they're able to just choose the best parts of the characters, and because the writing was so good and they were so authentic to the source material, as has been Marvel at its best, that they were able to just kind of craft these perfect stories. They almost used the overload of characters in it as a strength in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Like,
hard to do.
Daredevil don't do much, but he does enough. But like that source material was set up strong enough to where he only appears for a few seconds, and if you know, you know, and even if you don't know, you get it. Because you've probably seen trailers. Like I had homies who've never seen Daredevil, but they understood the Daredevil significance because he's become a pop culture figure.
Oh, I lost it.
It's like, I haven't seen
I
Daredevil.
Smacked the hell out of Alan's arm when that was happening.
That was the only part in the movie where I kind of like gasped out loud. I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, no,
because it was that one I did hear as a rumor. So to see it come on, I was like, "Oh, there it is."
And we had gotten Kingpin that same week.
Yeah.
See, DC, take notes. Like this is what happens when you build your universe over 10 plus years. Like you can get away with this kind of stuff.
Well, their approach is if one movie goes bad, they're just going to reboot the entire franchise every time.
Yeah,
why not?
But having Spider movie come out 5 years ago, it wouldn't have worked.
Let's wrap it up. Is this a top tier movie? Marvel movie, sorry. Where would you place this in the the informal rankings in your head? If you want to do a little bit of winners and losers, feel free to throw that in. But this should be quick, fast. Top tier movie. Where does it fit?
It's my favorite. I will say that it is my favorite Marvel movie. But I'm also a big Spider-Man fan, so I'm saying favorite. I'm not going to say best. Okay. What I did say is I think there's an argument for best, but I think even if not, like S tier, A tier at the very least.
Savon.
I would say it is upper echelon, but still a notch below my top movie. So. It's
because
not quite
of how it ended for you, like you just weren't satisfied.
100% because of the ending. I think you can have a mediocre, even final fight intro. Like there's a lot of times in a movie where there's room for you to make mistakes, and I can give a lot of leeway. The ending cannot be one of them. The ending really puts a bow on how I'm going to view the movie, and I had so much fun up until just my suspension of disbelief being completely shattered by that memory spell. All I could think about after was, what about pictures on your phone? What about social media? What about blah, 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 blah? What about conversations that he had with Doctor Strange as Spider-Man with his mask off? Like, all of that, that's all I could think about, even driving home from the theater, and that means something to me. You know, it means clearly I was bothered by it. So I'd put it in like the A- tier of still top Marvel, but a notch below Winter Soldier, Endgame, all that, which isn't a slight, because those are like a solid A+, but that ending puts it to an A- for me.
I don't know.
At least Savon doesn't just have tiers, but A+ tier, A- tier. Just that level of nuance.
Now I'm splitting hairs because I'm splitting hairs. If it wasn't that ending, it'd be A+ comfortably. Like that is the only mark I have against this movie.
But you don't even hate the ending; you just hate how they got to that point.
Yeah, the ending is fine, but I just think the memory spell's bad writing. Honestly, it introduces way too many plot holes that for me to be acceptable to be okay with.
Yeah.
But I don't
that's
get
fair.
That's
fair. I agree. I don't think that's a hot
I don't
take.
get that though. Like
what's the memory
magic.
of that necklace? Like the necklace.
All these things, yeah. But like all these things you're saying are just like, I don't know. I mean, like it's just like magic. It works, right? Like it's just gonna erase.
No,
it
but
like I mean,
like I said in the beginning, like they made a point out of that whole shrine in the high school, right?
Yeah.
Where it has his face next to Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So what's gonna happen? Maybe they'll explain it in later movies. I would have liked like a post-credit
it just becomes a shrine to
something.
their football team, you know. Flash.
No, but what's gonna happen that afternoon, next morning after that spell is cast, when everyone goes into school and sees this shrine and like, who's that dude next to Spider-Man? Maybe we should go investigate that guy.
No, it won't even be him. It'll just be a shrine to something else. Like also human brains are so susceptible to like suggestion that like
no, but it's physically there, Wesley. It's there. It's
what you don't think magic could transform something?
Oh yeah, maybe.
Right,
but they didn't say that. So would you have been better with that, Savon, if it was like we forget everybody and then also the magic like goes into people's phones and does the shrines?
If they had given maybe some kind of visual confirmation so that the writers could say, "Hey, I bet y'all at home are wondering." What does this look like in
so
practice?
Like a shot of his pictures like fading away and stuff like that.
Even that, memory loss stuff in general, I tend to not be crazy about because then I still have questions of there's major characters off world. Do they have a memory spell? Like they said, Nick Fury's off planet. Does that mean Nick Fury remembers that Spider-Man's Peter Parker?
Yeah.
Like all that's true and all, but again, for me, it's not the spell itself. It's purely just the logistics of it. What if I had a
magic? There are no logistics to magic.
No, I actually agree with Savon here.
Right.
And this is my favorite Marvel movie of all time, and I agree with Savon.
Okay.
Wes, what I would say is, it's just like with the Infinity Stones. You can have ultra powerful artifacts in your stuff. You have to have rules that it abides by. Otherwise, you're making it up as you go, and it goes from fantasy to bad writing.
And they've had that, and it's actually kind of now it's fun. It's kind of jarring in such a strong movie and an MCU when they've typically done a good job of fleshing those things out, especially with something like the snap, right? Like they had very defined rules for that and what that means for the world. It is kind of weird that they kind of ham-fisted this.
So my hope is that, and with the snap, I'll give them props, right? I had questions about the snap that later media expounded upon that answered questions I had. And they did a good job. So maybe down the line, they'll answer the logistics of what that spell looks like and it works. But the reason I don't have high hopes is because, that was bad when they did it in the comics. Like, that comic is super low rated for a reason because people were just like, what the hell is this? Like, it was people in the comics where they get away with way more, people were just like, what's going on? I just don't know how they're going to correct that. But for me, fantasy's fine. You gotta follow your own rules and be consistent with them. And like I said, Wes, I'm the king of being able to just roll with it. If I can't roll with it, bro, something going on.
I rolled with it totally. I was like, that's fine.
15 years of these movies, this is the first time I said I call bullshit.
All right, well, let's wrap up there. Friends out there listening to the show, many of you have seen this, but we haven't heard from you guys. So what did you think about it? Feel free to do the spoilers, talk about things that actually were in the movie in the comments, or you can just DM us. We don't know, like, did you love it? Was it up there? Are you rating this above Endgame? Like, where does this sit for you? And was this your favorite, Tom Holland version of Spider-Man that you've seen? Let us know. Hit us up on socials at confidently_pod. That's Instagram and Twitter. We'll be back hopefully next week, I believe. Thanks a lot, friends. Bye.
Bye.